You're listening to 105.3, The Gerblin, Dominaria's #1 music source for generic goblin noise.
This video is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc. If you're looking for cards in the US, look no further as you can use the promo code MTGMUDSTA to get you 5% off anything on the site. Or if you're in Canada like me, you can use the same promo code at Multizone to get 10% off your orders of singles. If cards aren't what you're looking for, Original Magic Art has playmats, tokens, and sweet art that you can use that same promo code to help you get 5% off your order there. And if you just want to help out the channel, you can always consider becoming a patron for as little as $1 a month and join the generic Goblin Gang. Hey gang, and welcome back. Today's game finds us at Kessel Run Games, and I'm playing Krenko Mob Boss. I keep Goblin Welder, Mutavault, Metallic Mimic, Battlecry Goblin, Throne of the God Pharaoh, a Snow-Covered Mountain, and Grenzo Havoc Raiser. Eric has recently sleeved up Go-Shintai of Life's Origin, keeping Ketria Triome, Rogrim Triome, Forest, Sanctum of Shattered Heights, Mirror Maid, Hoden of Night's Reach, and Go-Shintai of Shared Purpose. Shane is back with a Sidisi Brood Tyrant, keeping Nature's Lore, Arcane Denial, Birds of Paradise, Laboratory Maniac, Farseek, Sylvan Library, and Yavimaya Cradle of Growth. Shane's friend Chris has joined us playing Kalamax, keeping Regrowth, Mystic Sanctuary, Snap, Forest, Command Tower, Sulphur Falls, and Swan Song. I win the die roll and start us off. I play a Snow-Covered Mountain and cast a Goblin Welder, passing. Eric draws and plays a tapped Ketria Triome. Shane plays a Yavimaya, Cradle of Growth, and taps it for a green to cast Birds of Paradise. Chris draws, plays a Forest, and passes. I play a Mutavault for turn, and cast Metallic Mimic naming Goblins. I swing the Welder at Eric, dealing 1, and passing. Eric plays a Forest and casts Argothian Enchantress, passing to Shane. Shane draws, and taps the birds and the land to help cast a Farseek. He finds a Watery Grave, and passes. Chris just draws, plays a Frontier Bivouac tapped, and passes to me. My turn has me drawing and going straight to combat. I swing 3 at Shane, and in my post-combat main phase, cast Throne of the God Pharaoh. I then move to my end step, and this triggers the throne, dealing 2 to each of my opponents. Eric draws and plays a Swamp. He casts Sanctum of Shattered Heights, drawing a card from the Enchantress trigger. Shane draws, and since he can't hit his land drops naturally, he has to make them instead with the Wood Elves. He goes to grab an Overgrown Tomb and passes turn. Chris draws, plays a Command Tower, and passes back to me. I play an Investigator's Journal in my main phase, a new card I've included in the deck. I then move to combat, and swing at Chris for 3 this time. I then move to my end step, dealing 2 to everyone once more. Eric draws, and plays a Rogrim Triome, and then just passes turn. Shane casts a Nature's Lore in his main phase, going to find a breeding pool. He shocks himself as it comes in, and then uses it to cast a Sylvan Library, passing to Chris. Chris draws for turn, and plays a Mountain. He's got enough mana at this point for Kalamax, casting his commander, and passing turn. I draw for turn, and cast Soul Ring in my main phase. I then cast a Battlecry Goblin, and move to combat, swinging at Eric. He activates the Red Shrine, discarding a card to deal damage to take out the Metallic Mimic, and then takes the rest. At the end of my turn, everyone then just takes 1 from my throne trigger. Eric draws, and casts an Eidolon of Blossoms, drawing from the Enchantress, and then drawing from the Eidolon as it enters. After that he passes to Shane. Shane uses his library trigger and takes the full 8 to keep some extra cards. He plays a Verdant Catacomb, and then casts Sidisi, milling himself for 3, and hitting a creature so he gets to make a zombie token. Chris draws and plays a Sulphur Falls. He moves to combat swinging Kalamax at me, and after I declare no blocks, casts a Crop Rotation to put a counter onto Kalamax, and sacrifices 1 of his lands, and gets a copy of the spell, going to find 2 lands to put to field. I then take 5 commander damage, while Chris grabs a Taiga and a Stomping Grounds, and takes 2 as the Stomping Grounds comes into play untapped. I draw and cast Thousand Year Elixir in my main phase, but Shane responds by countering it with an Arcane Denial. I then move to combat and swing my creatures at Eric, who blocks the Welder with his Eidolon. Before damage is dealt, I pump the team with a Battlecry Goblin. The creatures trade, and Eric then takes 4. Moving to my end step, everyone then takes 1, and I pass to Eric. On Eric's upkeep, I draw 2 cards, while Shane replaces his draw with dredging back life from the loam to hand. Eric draws and casts a Sterling Grove, drawing a card from the Enchantress trigger. After some deliberation, Chris decides to counter it with a Swan Song, and Eric gets a bird token, and Chris gets a counter on his commander. Eric then casts Prismatic Omen, drawing another card from his Enchantress trigger, and passes to Shane. Shane uses his library but doesn't keep any extras, and plays and cracks a Fabled Passage. He grabs a snow-covered island, and then pays enough to cast Ravenous Chupacabra, which as it enters, destroys my Battlecry Goblin. Moving to combat, he swings Sidisi at Chris for 3. He also gets to mill his top 3 cards, hitting 1 creature, and gets to make a zombie token. He then casts Life from the Loam to get some lands back from his graveyard, and passes to Chris. Chris draws for turn and plays an Exotic Orchard. He casts a Sakura Tribe Elder, and then moves to combat, swinging Kalamax at me, who connects for 6, and passes turn. My main phase has me playing a mountain, and I then cast a Goblin Recruiter, going to find a Goblin Ringleader, a Dockside Extortionist, a Goblin Matron, and a Goblin Warchief, and put them on top of my library with the Ringleader on top. After that's done, I pass to Eric. Eric draws for turn and plays a Noble Hierarch as he moves to his main phase. He then casts Go-Shintai of the Boundless Vigor, drawing a card, and then plays an Azorius Guildgate, which comes in tapped. Shane draws with the library and dredges Loam and Stinkweed with 2 of the draws, hitting 1 creature off of both of the dredges, making a zombie token. He then plays a Command Tower for turn and casts a World Shaper. He then follows up with a Crypt Breaker and moves to combat. He swings Sidisi at me for 3 and mills 3, hitting another creature and making another zombie. I then take 3 damage from Sidisi, and Shane passes to Chris. Chris draws and plays an island. He then moves to combat, swinging Kalamax at Shane, who chumps with the Wood Elves. Chris then passes, and at the end of his turn, I activate the Investigator's Journal, removing a counter from it to draw a card. I draw and cast Ringleader in my main phase, shockingly hitting 3 goblins out of the top 4. I then cast a Dockside Extortionist, making 4 treasure tokens. I use some of them to help a Goblin Warchief, and moving to combat, I swing the Ringleader and the Recruiter at Chris, who chumps and sacrifices the Elder on the Ringleader, but still takes 1 from the Recruiter. After that, I move to my end step, dealing 2 to everyone with my Throne trigger, and during my end step, Eric discards a card to Go-Shintai of Shared Purpose, and deals 2 to my Warchief. Eric draws, and plays a Destiny Spinner, and Shane taps 6 zombies to draw 2 and lose 2. Eric then follows up by enchanting himself with a Paradox Haze, and passes to Shane. Shane uses his library trigger in his main phase, and dredges back a Dakmor Salvage and Golgari Thug from his library. He hits a creature in each of the dredges, and gets 2 zombie tokens, and then draws for turn, and then plays a Snow-Covered Swamp in his main phase. Shane then casts an Arcane Signet, and then Life from the Loam to bring back more lands from his graveyard to his hand. Once he's done, he casts a Demonic Tutor, and passes through his phases, moving to his end step, and discards down to 7, pitching some dredge cards for his next turn. Chris draws and plays an island. Moving to combat, he swings Kalamax at me, and I chump with the Dockside. Chris then casts Thirst for Discovery, which gets a copy of Kalamax. Once that's all done, he casts an Archmage Emeritus and passes turn. I draw and play a Perforos God of the Forge. I then cast Grenzo Havoc Razor, and everyone takes 2 as it enters thanks to Perforos. Moving to combat, I swing the Ringleader and Recruiter at Chris, who blocks and eats the recruiter with the Archmage, but still takes 2. With the Krenko trigger, I go to his commander. After that, I move to my end step, and everyone takes an additional 1 thanks to my throne trigger, and I pass to Eric. Eric draws and plays a Garul Guildgate which comes in tapped. He casts Sidisi and then Haunted of Night's Reach. He draws a card for the Enchantress trigger, and then draws another card thanks to Sidisi and gains 1 life. In his end step, Shane activates the Crypt Breaker, discarding a card and making a zombie token, and then taps enough zombies to draw 2 and lose 2, and dredging a Stinkweed Imp with 1 of them to get another zombie token from Sidisi as she sees a creature enter the graveyard. Shane draws and plays a Hinterland Harbor. He then casts Stitch Together, and since he has Threshold, targets the copy of the Craterhoof Behemoth in his graveyard. Chris responds by casting and copying a Snap to bounce Sidisi and the Birds of Paradise, and gets 2 draw triggers from his Archmage, hoping to find a counterspell. He also gets to untap 4 lands. Once those have resolved, he casts a Brainstorm as well, drawing a card from the Archmage and then drawing 3 and putting 2 back. Chris puts back 2 cards, but sadly didn't find anything to stop this, and as a result, the Craterhoof comes in and we all die in combat. Game review time. So I'm sure a couple people are going to be disappointed that Craterhoof once again finished out a game, but it is a green finisher and you kind of have to accept that. I certainly do. I think if Shane hadn't closed out the game on that turn, I probably was going to on my untap, since it takes very little for me to go off with Krenko and having Perforas out on the field. Chris unfortunately didn't get to showcase his deck as well as he would have liked. Typically I see a lot of Kalamax decks running ways to tap down their commander that isn't combat related, since you can lose your commander that way, but he was able to get some pretty sweet spells off, like that Snap and getting a copy of it, and then drawing 2 cards with the Archmage, plus untapping 4 lands, only for 2 mana seems pretty sweet. This was the second game we filmed with Eric's Go-Shintai deck, and the first one was about 2 hours long and super grindy to the point that actually 2 people had to get up and leave. I'm sure he'll be happy to play it again on the channel, so I likely won't be using that second game. That being said, the deck does seem to function very well with very little mana, and even though he's playing pretty much only enter the battlefield tap lands, he was getting a remarkable amount of draw, and seemed to be doing a good job of controlling my Goblin Haste enablers. This video wouldn't be possible without the help from my sponsors, Cool Stuff Inc., Multizone, Original Magic Art, and Alter Sleeves. But it definitely wouldn't be possible without the help from you, the viewers, and my patrons. So I just want to say thank you for watching, and to remember, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.